The next thing we're going to do is try to write the equation for a graph. To do that, we're going to write in this form. So it's either going to be sine all right, maybe we'll use round brackets here and square brackets here. Now it might be sine or it might be cos. Usually you're asked to do one of them. We'll try to do both of them for this equation. Okay, so it's either going to be sine or cos. Not sure which one. Okay, so to do that, what we need to do is we need to figure out A, B, C, and D. Some of them are easier to find than others. All right, let's start by drawing in the midline. This is always going to be helpful for us because that's going to give us our amplitude, it's going to give us our D value, and help us find our B value. So first of all, if we know where the midline is, you know what D is. D in this case has to be 2. Okay, because normally the sine graph centers around the x-axis, but this time you can see it centers around y is 2. Okay, and then you should be able to see that it's going up and down 2 units. Okay, there is a formula for that, but I don't think you need that. We're just going to say A is 2, okay, because it's going up and down 2 units from the midline. Then comes probably the trickiest part, and that's to figure out what the period is. Okay, and the period, if we were looking at sine, let's look at just sine, would be from the midline going up. Where is the next time that happens? Right here. All right, if we look at that distance is 12 units. So B is what? Well, first of all, let's write this in. The period is 12. Now, in the previous situation, how did we find the period? We went 2 pi divided by B equals the period. Okay, but this time we're given the period. So if we put 2 pi over B equals 12 and we cross multiply, what you end up doing is saying 12 divided by B, oops, sorry, not that, my mistake. 12B equals 2 pi, and to get B, you're going to go 2 pi divided by 12. So this is kind of weird. To get B, you go 2 pi divided by 12. To get the period, you go 2 pi divided by B. All right, so how do we figure out what B is? You take 2 pi and divide by the period. Okay, so in this case it's 2 pi divided by 12. All right, so the last thing we need to do is figure out the phase shift, and you should be able to see that for the sine graph, okay, sine of theta, oh, we actually can't use theta here because we have an x. For sine of x, this graph has moved nowhere, because normally the sine graph starts here going up. It's still starting at the midline going up. So the sine graph has not moved left or right. Okay, but the cos graph, here is the peak of the cos graph. Normally, if you think about the cos graph, we start at the peak. Where x is 0, we have the peak of the cosine graph. So how far has this peak moved from here, from the y-axis? How far is this? It's 3 units. So the cosine graph phase shift is 3. Okay? By the way, you should notice that the sine graph is very symmetrical. This is 3 units, 3 units, 3 units, 3 units. Okay? All right, so now let's write the equation. For the sine graph, we're going to have y is 2 sine. Now 2 pi over 12, let's write that as pi over 6. X, and for sine it's 0. And then let's write the cos graph. Everything will be the same. The only thing that's going to be different is the phase shift. Okay, let's try another one. All right, what we need to do is we need to figure out A, B, C, D. First of all, where's the midline of this graph? Well, let's see. This looks like is what? 5. This looks like is it -3? More or less. Okay, that means the midline must be at 1. Okay, hope that makes sense. Up 4, down 4, so the amplitude is 4. All right. Now let's figure out what is the period. Okay, from the midline moving up to the midline moving up, how far is that? It's pi. So what is the b value? 2 pi divided by the period. So b is 2. What is the phase shift for sine? It's 0. Again, the regular sine graph on the y-axis is 0. Now it can move up without having a phase shift. Okay? What is it for cosine? Well, again, we're going to look at the peak and how far is it moved over from 0. It looks like 0.25 pi, which is pi by 4. So writing my equation, y equals 4 sine in my cosine graph. Okay, one more. Okay, so where's the midline? Well, this graph looks like it goes from 3 to -3, so the midline is right there. It hasn't gone up or down. The amplitude is 3. What is my period? Well, it doesn't really matter where you start as long as you go back to the original spot. So I mean, if we wanted to start here and go down, where does it go from the peak down again? What is this period? Well, -0.25 pi plus 3/4 pi, this is exactly pi. So my b value will be 2 pi divided by pi, which again is 2. All right. Now, how far has sine shifted? Remember, the original sine graph starts at 0 moving up. Where is it at the midline moving up? Well, it's here, or it's here. You can actually use either one. Okay? This one doesn't have a label, so let's use this one. What's happened? It looks like it's moved right 1/2 pi. Okay, so phase shift will be pi over 2. What about cosine? Again, we can use either of these peaks. Okay, doesn't matter. Let's use this one here. How far has this moved? This is a phase shift of -pi by 4. Okay, -1/4 pi. So my equation will be you don't have to write that plus 0. All right, there it is. Now I think there is some homework. The yellow sheet, or the yellow sheets, there are 14 graphs, and I would like you to try to write the equation for those 14.